logical narrative. But if you're talking about, well, why do bodies always fall when you release them? They're not going to say, well, there's something about soteriology that we need to explain. Basically the idea is, well, God is concurring always, or for the most part, in this world, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's not right to say they're not interested in physics, but they're not being revolutionary about it.
That certainly is true.
To bring a couple of others in at this point, John, you had a question.
Thank you. Yes. Just an observation, Dan, on which I will...
Sorry, the microphone. Slide it up.
There you go.
How's that? Perfect. Fine. In several of the passages you've quoted here, it's certainly true of Leibniz, and it's true in one of the Spinoza passages. A distinction is made between rules and laws. There is the statement that God has imposed rules and laws, not laws or rules or laws. So the two words don't seem to be used synonymously. And I just wondered if you would like to comment on that. The reason I ask is that if you look at Boyle's essay on the vulgar conception of nature, he actually makes a very critical distinction between law and rule, saying that inanimate matter is too dumb to know what a law is, and so it's inappropriate to use a discourse of law, and he prefers to talk about rules. Yeah. So Boyle doesn't believe in Boyle's law, I mean, if you actually formulate it in that kind of way. But this distinction between rule and law strikes me as rather interesting, because it seems to recur through these passages, and I just wonder what the story is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Descartes uses them interchangeably. In Principles Part 2, those sections starting in 36, where he's actually setting them out, he calls them laws explicitly, but he also refers to them as rules, and I don't think that he's making a distinction. I think when Boyle comes along late, and I think that I think that Spinoza is following Descartes directly. As you know, Spinoza wrote a commentary on the Principles of Philosophy. But when Boyle makes that distinction, I think he's making the point that Descartes was wrong to use the word law, and because law should be kept for this, for what it is that humans frame to make societies, and God frames for humans to obey, and you have to be a conscious agent in order to have a law. But I think in Descartes, they're interchangeable.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Andrew, I think you're next in the queue.
It's still on.
Thanks. This is in some sense, I had a similar question to the exchange involving Marilyn and Nancy, but in a follow-up to that, you quoted the paragraph on your second page of your handout from Principles 128, Descartes,
right,
which Marilyn referenced about how you can't appeal to final causation, you have to
right,
only think of God as an efficient cause, and we'll start with certain of his properties and then go from there to various...
Right.
But, it seems as though, I guess I've never understood this move exactly, because it seems as though Descartes himself is going to want to say that one of the things we know about God is that God is good, and that at the end of the fourth meditation that we can then assume something about theodicy on the basis of our thoughts regarding God's goodness, namely that in the end it all somehow works out, and we may not be able to see the exact details, but God is going to resolve evil into good somehow in this aesthetic way that Descartes talks about. So it does look as though there's some willingness to appeal to final causation or purposes there, and yet he seems to forbid it here. Do you think it's just a question of particular laws versus big general story about the universe, or is there something else?
I mean, that's actually an enormous question.
Yeah.
People also point very often to the apparent use of final causes in the sixth meditation, where he says that, you know, we were given the senses in order to guide us in life. One of the things, I mean, if you look carefully on that, when dealing with natural things, I think that one can read that as limiting himself to natural philosophy. First of all, that's one possible answer. But I think actually when you look at the fourth meditation and the sixth meditation very carefully, there's something a little different going on, that we are not, the thing is, I mean, Spinoza is not, I'm sorry, Descartes is not denying that there are final causes in nature. You know, we do things for a purpose, for example, and it's possible to read him as saying that God created something, and that something has a purpose. And I think when you look at those, when you look at his use of final causes in the meditations very carefully, it is, I think, always creaturely final causes that he has in mind, and not divine final causes. But one would have to look at the things.
Even in the
very
theodicy
quickly.
cases where...
I think the theodicy, you know, I think when you look at the theodicy carefully, it's not really clear that he's actually asserting that. Saying, well, somebody might say that, but that's not going to be the final thing that he comes to. So it's not clear that that is intended to be his assertion of final causality there.
Okay, time's up. We reconvene again at 4:30, but meanwhile, please express our thanks again.